Rachel Barton Pine, it's such an honor to have you on the program, especially because I know you're quite the busy individual, especially these past few years. I think just in 2018, you released 3 different albums, plus you recorded the album that just recently came out just about a month ago, which I want to talk about in just a moment. But for you, looking back on with 2019 coming to a close, do you feel like you've had a whirlwind few years?
Oh, I've had a whirlwind few decades. This is album number 39. Yeah, it's fun to think that I've had the opportunity to do so many artistic projects that I'm passionate about, and needless to say, I have, at least a few dozen on my wish list yet to come. So I'll definitely never get bored, and hopefully I'll get it all done in my lifetime.
Well, speaking about projects that you've been working on, one that seems to have grown, especially these past few years, has been your organization and your database, Music by Black Composers. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So Music by Black Composers, or MBC, it's acronym. We started almost 20 years ago in response to an album that I had made of violin concertos by composers of African descent from Europe and the Caribbean from the classical and romantic eras, 17 and 1800s. And people were so astonished to realize that composers, Black composers, were writing such great music way back then and wanted to learn more. And especially students and their parents and teachers were very curious to, are very, much wishing to play some of this repertoire themselves. So I already had a charitable organization, my RBP Foundation, which supports young artists with instrument loans and financial assistance. So I decided to take up this repertoire project as a pedagogical effort to create a curriculum for violin and ultimately for other instruments so that all of this great music would be available and organized by skill level and edited for young people. And ultimately, it's grown to have many, many other resources. We have a coloring book of Black composers, a timeline poster. We have databases of repertoire for professional performers, a living composers directory, bibliography, classroom materials, all kinds of great stuff. And it's just, and now after all these years of, these composers kind of being ignored and dismissed to a large degree, just in the last couple of years, the classical music world has really woken up to the fact that there's a lot of absolutely first-rate music that has been, kind of unjustifiably neglected all this time and really should have been in our repertoire all along, and that we're all missing out by not hearing it. So, it's really exciting to see that people are really starting to get excited about this music, and we're very grateful that we have resources to help people out, that we've been doing this long enough that we've developed these materials that people can draw upon. And of course, it's important to inspire African American youngsters to help them learn about the history of Black participation in classical music, that Frederick Douglass was a violinist, that Coretta Scott King was a violinist, that there were all Black orchestras in the U.S. in the 1800s, so that they understand that this is their music too, and will hopefully be inspired to become part of classical music's future. But it's also important for students of all races and ethnicities to play a wider, a wider breadth of music that's been written, whether you're talking about Asian composers or, just all the women composers, all the music that is, all the great music. We shouldn't only play a narrow slice of it, because classical music is there to bring us together, to help us understand each other, and we all miss out if we don't get to experience the full expression of our humanity.
Absolutely. And I think, I was looking through the website and looking through the database, and it just seems like I can't believe that this hasn't kind of been done before. But thank you for kind of, making the database and making that available to younger students, and just for people who are fans of classical music to, regardless of what their background is, to be able to have that at their fingertips.
Well, thanks for helping spread the word. musicbyblackcomposers.org.
So on top of working with that, organization, you're back in the studio. You've got this new album coming out that just came out just in November, so just about a month ago. And it's kind of a mix between 2 composers that I necessarily wouldn't have thought about putting together. It's, Czech composer Dvorak and then Soviet Armenian Khachaturian. For you, recording these 2 violin concertos, why did you think that was kind of the perfect meeting of those two very different men?
Well, it's funny how it all happened, actually, because both of those concertos I learned when I was 15, and I performed numerous times over the years, and they were definitely each on my wish list of things I hoped to record in my lifetime. But I had never thought of putting them together until a couple seasons ago, when I happened to be performing both of them in the same season, and it really struck me how each of the concertos, despite being, inspired by music of different countries and, of course, from different centuries, actually, but they both are so permeated with the rhythms and melodies of the folk music of their region of Eastern Europe. And, they both are so gorgeous and, dramatic and appealing. And, and I've lived with them both for so long. And I was actually supposed to record, or I should say I was not, I'd planned to record two very different concertos, a pairing that I'm still very excited about and hope to do in the near future. But the conductor for that project got a last-minute conflict, so I had the orchestra, the studio, the producer, everything was ready to go for those recording dates. And I thought, well, I don't want to just give up the whole session. Maybe I'll record something else. And I thought, oh, Dvorak, Khachaturian. I just had the idea to pair them, and I guess I'll go and do it. And so it was very spontaneous, actually. But that really fits the music in a cool sort of way, because, being so inspired by folk music, each of the concertos does have a real flavor of spontaneity to it. So it was sometimes you have these grand plans that you've worked on for years, and sometimes it's just a total last-minute surprise, and it works out really, really well.
And for you working on this music, as you mentioned, you kind of grew up with it. I think in the liner notes you mentioned you had been introduced to one of the concertos at the age of 15. And now, years later, kind of getting into the studio recording it, were you surprised at maybe how your plan of attack on how you wanted to add your own flavor to these concertos?
Well, I think that what makes a great concerto great is the fact that you can never get bored with it. It never feels you never get burned out on it, I guess is a good way to say it. No matter how many times I return to each of these pieces, they still feel fresh, and I still feel excited to be exploring them, just like I did 30 years ago. But definitely, each time I've returned to it, I have more insights and discover more nuances, and definitely playing them with different musicians each time gives you new ideas. And so I really feel like my relationship has definitely deepened so much with each of them, to the point where I feel like I have something very personal to say. So it's in the studio, it's really a mixture of, your convictions and the ideas that you've carefully thought out, but still being open to any ideas that might occur extemporaneously and, just in the moment, and, never letting yourself stop exploring, but also making sure that you capture your fully formed thoughts and, leave that for posterity. That's the exciting thing about music. There's no end point in math. 2 + 2 = 4, and you can't get more perfect than that. But in music, there's no such thing as perfect, which on the one hand is frustrating, but on the other hand, it means that no matter how good you are, you can still, aspire to greater heights or see new horizons. And it's a little intimidating in a way, because you realize that no matter how hard you've worked and how far you've come, that hopefully if you continue working hard, in 10 years you'll sound better yet. And then you're like, okay, knowing that I can sound better and will sound better, like how can I go into the studio and record this today? But yet, if you don't do that, then you're never going to do it. So you just have to, feel good about the work you've done up to this point. And when it gets to a certain level, then it is fun to be able to share it.
Yeah, and I can imagine as well going into the studio, it must be different after, if you have performed it live in front of an audience, because I'm sure the energy from the audience differs dramatically from the energy in the studio with a very clean, almost calm-like environment. Do you find that your approach energy-wise has to change getting ready to head into the studio versus, of course, getting ready to perform it on the stage?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking about that. That is one of the hardest things about recording. I feel like it's a very different art form because, on the stage, you're in the moment and you're just giving it everything, and that's that. But in the studio, of course, you have to somehow pace yourself. You still have to put your full emotions into it, but you know that it's not going to be a 45-minute performance. It's going to be a 4-hour session, and you have to play it full blast that whole entire time. And, and then instead of the inspiration of the audience, you finish the piece and the audience goes, yay, and they clap. Instead, you've got the guy in the studio going, okay, that was a good take. Well, why don't you go back and do, section C again? And,
right.
This time, try to be a little bit more whatever it is. And you're like, oh my gosh. So sometimes I just get so drained by the end that, I know I've played really well if I almost feel like I want to start sobbing, because that means that I've given it everything and I've got no emotions left. Yeah, it's hard, but definitely worth it.
Yeah. You were talking about how your previous years have been kind of busy and jam-packed, especially with all the releases that you've had in the past 4 years. Looking to the future, can you maybe give us a sneak peek on some of the things that you're working on, new projects that are coming up or new performances that you're excited about?
Well, actually, I'm going to be world premiering a concerto written for me by Los Angeles-based composer Billy Childs. Billy wrote a really moving violin and piano work based on the killing of Philando Castile that appeared on my Blues Dialogues album. And he had previously written an unaccompanied multi-movement suite for me that I frequently perform in my Bach recitals. So we've collaborated already twice, and I love his music, and he's writing this concerto for me that's going to be premiered in July. So I'm going to start getting the drafts of it soon and offering my feedback and enjoying that back and forth. And then I'm going to be taking it around to a variety of different orchestras throughout the next season, and hopefully more seasons to follow, and hopefully putting that down on album as well. So various other recording projects in the works, but that's the most immediate repertoire project on hand that I'm so excited about.
Yeah, it sounds incredible. I'll be waiting for that one. It sounds great. Well, Rachel Barton, thank you so much for joining us today for Classical Conversations. Really loved, the Dvorak and the Khachaturian album, and I'm excited to hear, what you'll be up to next.
All right. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you.